One love. Thanks for tuning in. And a special shout out to all my legal aliens. Now, in this video, we're going to be analyzing something. Now, after being in the US for 10 plus years, we're going to be doing an analysis and a comparison between the US and Guyana. And we're going to be analyzing certain very important considerations for any person that might be thinking about moving to the US or a person that might be contemplating what Guyana is like. So I'm going to give you a nice analysis so we could now come up to speed as to whether or not after 10 years plus, I think that the move from Guyana to the US would have been one that made complete sense and still makes a lot of sense even now. So one of the first things we're going to start to analyze, because there's a number of factors that I want to consider, but one of the first things that we're going to analyze is the finances. Because if you're pocketing right, you don't know, most things is not going to go right. So when we analyzing the money, US versus Guyana dollars, obviously, most persons, when you move to the US, you're going to make more money in the US, right? In comparison to Guyana, most people, depending on if you're working a 9 to 5 or if you're doing entrepreneurship, the US is going to transfer to at least 200 to 1 Guyana dollar, right? So we know automatically if you're working for a reasonable little bread over here in Guyana, the money is going to flip to 200 times that when you change it because of the exchange rate. So technically, you would always make more money in the US depending on the kind of job you're doing in comparison to Guyana. But the thing is this, as long as you're staying in the US and you're living in the US for a number of years, you're going to realize that certain things is add up, and guess what? You spend more money on certain things as well. So even though you're making more, you're going to spend more because certain things is just a bit more pricey in the US in comparison to Guyana. And one of these things is like your rent. Rent is higher in the US than in Guyana. And certain utility bills is a bit more higher as well, depending on, where's the bill and depending on a lot of different factors as well, because different states might got different, levels for certain bills that you might pay. You mightn't pay as much on your electric bill and stuff like that like you would pay in New York in certain other states. But still, I think it might be a bit more, or Guyana is going to be most times cheaper on certain utilities and stuff like that in comparison to the US. Another thing to consider, right? Because finances is good, but finances is not every single thing. Sometimes you just gotta consider health and nutrition, because guess what? Health is your greatest wealth. And if you ain't got your health, you really ain't got nothing, because you can't walk, you can't enjoy all the nice infrastructure. No part of the world you can't enjoy the weather, nothing like that if you're healthy, right? So we're gonna analyze and we're gonna say, when it comes down to health, because we just consider the money. We know we can make more money in the US, right? But when we considering your health and nutrition, Guyana versus the US. Healthcare in the US is better right now because you could get certain very technical surgeries and all them things done over here. But the thing is this, as far as nutrition, you can get more healthier foods in Guyana than in the US. And you're going to get more access to one of the most important vitamins or molecules, which is vitamin D. 365 days of the year, out of that, you might get at least 300 days where you're going to get the adequate amount of sunlight. In Guyana, Guyana is tropical, very warm and nice weather most of the year, right? But if you need certain surgeries and certain medical procedures done, you might still need to travel overseas because not everything is always done in Guyana as far as the healthcare system. But we all know the US is very advanced, and certain things you could get done very easily depending on what the state is that you're in, or they could transfer you to a hospital that can. So as far as healthcare, the US beat out Guyana. But as far as nutrition, getting wholesome food, non-GMO food, access to fresh air, access to abundant sunlight, access to good water without no fluoride and them thing, fresh water, lakes and them thing, yeah, they can get more in Guyana than in the US. So nutrition, Guyana win. Healthcare, I would say the US win, but your overall health, you gotta remember prevention is always better than cure. And the nutrition and your access to a healthier environment in the parts of Guyana that even when most people is living in Guyana, you're still gonna find a more healthier environment with more fresh air, more fresh food, and guess what? Less than 1 million people too. And right now, Guyana is one of the fastest growing economies and one of the richest countries in the world. So a lot of these things might change. We might even see a change in the financial part. But as for right now, we know that the US is winning as far as finances, and the US is winning as far as health and healthcare. And nutrition, which is also going to foster health, is coming in at a big advantage in Guyana. So when it comes down to health and nutrition, I would say it's almost like an even scale between the two. So we already consider finances, we consider health, and we considering nutrition. Those three parameters, and them three parameters is important because if you're considering your health, you're not gonna live no way for long. And if you're considering your finances, you won't be able to afford most things. And that's a very important thing to consider because that's one of the things that a lot of persons sometimes is put on the back burner. They don't realize just how important that is as a factor to consider when you're moving to anywhere on some real stuff. You know what I'm saying? But we consider another thing though. Because as we talk about finances, as we talk about health, and as we talk about nutrition, we also got to contemplate the quality of life. What's your quality of life for an individual, for a person, for me, in comparison to Guyana and the US? Which one? I would say get a better quality of life. And the parameters that we're considering for quality of life is access to work, right? We're talking about a feeling of belonging to this place. Like you're feeling like an outcast everywhere you go, somebody looking at you weird, following you around stores, X, Y, or Z. Do you feel like you belong there or do you feel like an outcast? And can you find um, gainful employment there? And can you make a comfortable living in whichever this environment is in comparison Guyana and the US? So we considering that, and then I'm gonna give you my views for the last 10 years, and I'm gonna give you my analysis and my from my experience from being in the US for the last 10 or more years. So we considering work, we considering belonging, we considering relationships. What are your relationships like? Do you have certain relationships that you're able to foster wherever it is? If it's Guyana or if it's in the US, because that in itself is add to the quality of life. Because if you're socializing, you're meeting nobody, you ain't got no girl, you ain't got no man, you ain't got nobody that you really could be with, depending on if it's a female we're talking about. You ain't got nobody on, by your side. Sometimes you could start to feel lonely, homesick, and them thing, and it becomes an uncomfortable environment. Cause who really wants to be alone? Especially if you're in the US and it's winter time and all of them time it's just you battering all the time. So you want to consider a feeling of belonging and relationships as well. You want to consider entertainment What's the area like? Is it boring? Because then itself is going to contribute to your quality of life. And you're talking about your personal safety as well in the US versus Guyana. So all of these things coming together for we contemplate and analyze quality of life. So when we're thinking about this whole quality of life conversation, I for one would have to say this. As far as quality of life, it really depends on you. After 10 plus years of living in the US and analyzing it in comparison to Guyana, I would say if you're comparing and contrasting the quality of life, it really depends on you. Because guess what? Some persons are not going to be that much moved by the um, access to work because they might be entrepreneur. They might be able to make money wherever they are, and that's their work. So the thing is this: going out and finding employment might not affect them from staying up in a particular place and feeling comfortable. But that's for entrepreneurs because they ain't going out and look for no work. So technically, they could be any part of the world and still have a good quality of life and don't even have to consider employment in the area. They just got to consider if they can make their money in that independent way that they're making it. See, if I had to say a comparison from my perspective when it comes down to work, I would say right now, right? Guyana, in comparison to the US, you want to work where you're going to make more money. So if you're going to go do a 9 to 5, you want to contemplate and you got the ability to travel to the US or stay in Guyana, then I would say, hey, travel to the US and see how much you'll be able to make for that same job or something close to where you was thinking or about to go and do in Guyana. Because guess what? You want to get paid the most for your services because life don't rewind. So as long as you're gonna get paid, you want to get paid the most for the day that will never come back. Every day you're going punching and you spend them hours there is a special day because it's one of one. It will never be that day again. So you want to make sure you're making the most money for your time that you're going to be investing in any job. So I would go for say, look, work in the US if you could and see how the money is going to come in, but hold your head, right? So you could save something or do something. And as we're talking about safety, I would go for say, Guyana is a much safer place to live. No wars, the crime and violence, even though we might look at it and say, oh, it's high in comparison to the US because of the amount of people in Guyana and just the level of, crime. But if you consider it, in the US, they got more gun crime, they got more mass shootings, they got all kind of crazy crimes be going on in the US. You don't really hear them things going on in Guyana. Even though you don't really hear these things going on that much in Guyana. So I would go to say as far as safety, I would go say Guyana beat out the US as far as safety. As far as work, I would say the US got the advantage in that arena right there. Entertainment, obviously. What are you entertained by? Because not everybody entertained by the same thing. But the thing is this, the US is catering to so many things to entertain so many different types of people that you might find more entertainment in the US than in Guyana. Plus, most persons who are entertainers, artists, actors, and different persons in the entertainment industry, everybody want in the US and work for US dollars. So as far as entertainment, I would have to say the US beat out Guyana for me because the things them like stage show and different museums and different cinemas, movies, parks, different areas you can go and visit, and a whole lot of different events that you can partake in. You might not have that much in comparison in Guyana. So as far as entertainment, I would say the US for me is the winner in that place. And as we consider relationships, relationships is really who you relate with. If you hold in your mind and you say, all right, good, I can just come and I can walk and then I can keep my social life and XYZ for when I in Guyana or when I someplace else. I don't know if you was that type of person, but to think about it, I wouldn't advise nobody to do that. You gotta live where you're there. See, if you're living where you're there, then guess what? You gotta learn how to relate with everybody around you. And it's the best thing for you to do if you could bring your spouse with you, or if you could have your better half with you while you're traveling, or make sure that you have a person along with you so that you don't feel that type of loneliness, and you're able to, just have a companion, because life is not meant to wait, spend alone, or for put off to live later. Every day is special, and that's how I just see it. So I would go for say, as far as the whole conversation with relationships, I would gotta say that Guyana beat out the US a little bit, just for me, because the age at which I would have came to the US, right? You build a lot of relationships in Guyana that are foundation relationships. Relationships when you had a number of years that you would have been able to invest. Then you come to the US and it's all about work. You get workmates and X, Y, or Z, but you don't build that real close relationship like you would back home. For most people, for me at least. So I would have to say, as far as relationships, some of my more closer relationships would be in Guyana. So Guyana kind of lose out on a lot of things, but as far as relationships, they definitely take the win over the US. And now, as we consider um, belonging, belonging, I would have to say, Guyana. No matter where you travel in the world, you would never feel as respected, or you will never feel at home, for me, in no place else like you would feel when you're back where you're from, with people with the same accent like you, a lot of persons with the same mindset, a lot of same culture, similar foods, and them type of thing. You feel like you belong. It feels like home. And a lot of persons could travel around the world and make a lot of different places their home. But for me, I could do them things too. But me, you don't feel the same or exactly like you would feel that comfort, that relaxation, that you know every place that you could travel to. You don't have to pull up a GPS. You could jump in your car, you could drive, drive around the town, drive around wherever you want to go, because you don't know the streets them, right? So as far as belonging, and then in the US too, they got this thing right now that's going on with the immigrant crisis and a lot of other things that would make you feel less at home, because persons are going to be looking at you as if you're one of the ills, or you're one of the persons who are in the country causing this havoc and a part of the immigrant crisis and stuff like that, at least in 2025 with Trump coming in. We got to contemplate them things. So as far as belonging, and then as you travel around different places in the US, you're going to different malls and stuff like that. You might see that persons might give you a little extra follow, or a bit longer look, because they might consider you a threat to their business or whatever's going on, and they might think you want to pocket something without paying. Who knows? Persons got all types of stereotypes that they hold in their head. And not to mention, again, but the US is going through an immigrant crisis. A lot of other places in the world too, but the US especially. And especially states that are border states or sanctuary cities like New York and stuff like that, where there's a lot of immigrants. Persons are beginning to grow like a sour taste in their mouth. Immigrants and persons who are not originally from the US right now. So it might get a little hard time fitting in and feeling like you belong in the US. I got to give Guyana the win in this comparison for me. So let me go back from the top of the list now and analyze all of these things out and really conversate on this, because I would go for say after 10 years, plus living in the US, if I had to compare it to Guyana, those are the parameters that I would consider mostly, and that's how I feel about it. We could talk about it in the comment section. Let's have a conversation about that. And I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks again for watching. And if you haven't already, please remember to like the video and subscribe.